Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Wednesday, July 17th, 2024. I am John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Senior editor Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hey, John.
And our Washington commentary columnist, Matthew Continetti. Hi, Matt.
Hi, John.
Matt, I think you and I had the same reaction, I know, from Twitter, from your Twitter last night and mine, which is that the second night of the Republican convention showed what I would call a deliriously happy party. And I would say this is the first time that I have seen Republicans actually happy, including Donald Trump, by the way, who was not exactly Mr. Happy. I mean, I don't even know when, because I wouldn't say the 2012 Republican convention was a particularly happy event. Or
maybe 04.
04, absolutely.
20 years ago.
Yes. Okay. So, one night, but my point is that the vibe of the evening was high good cheer, and it didn't matter what the text of the various speeches were, some of which were very dark, inflected about, the border and murders, and Ted Cruz talking about that, and Tom Cotton talking about that, and a lot of talk about, the sins and failures and omissions of the Biden administration. All negative, very negative, but that was not the overall impression. The overall impression you got was of this gigantic party of, however many 5, 6, 7,000 people in that arena who are having the time of their lives and feeling a kind of political bliss that is very much has not been evident in American life, in American political life, for a very, very long time.
Well, the party's confident about November. The party's united behind its nominee. The party has united around the platform. So compare it to 2016, when the party was still divided over Trump, when their old guard was very active, very strong. Now into 2024, that old guard is either retired, it's died, it's left the GOP, it's decided to accommodate itself as best it can to Trump. So what you have in the room in Milwaukee is tens of thousands of people who love Donald Trump. They agree with his message. And I think most importantly, what brought a lot of energy to the convention last night was this decision that the Trump campaign has made to highlight what they're calling everyday Americans. And so you don't see a lot of elected officials during the primetime hours at the Republican National Convention. Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis, a lot of people in the Beltway were interested in their speeches, but they were placed relatively early in the night. And instead, the closer you got to the evening news cutoff, the more you heard from women and some men who talked about their experiences as the parents or relatives of victims of crime, the mother of someone who had died from a fentanyl overdose. And these everyday Americans have a genuineness to them, an authenticity that you don't often see on televised political conventions. I can't really remember a convention where the people that aren't well known have such energy and have such compelling stories. So I think that added a lot. And the one other point I'd make about last night, 2 points. First is, there were a lot of female speakers throughout the night. And I think that is meant to address Trump's relative weakness with women. He is very strong with men. The gender gap's actually working in the Republicans' favor this year, because it's not just white men who are for Trump. In fact, white men are less eager to embrace Trump than Hispanic men and African American men in some cases. But you see this kind of compassionate side many of these women speakers talked about the differences between Trump on television and Trump in person. try to bring out the human side of Trump. And it wasn't just Laura Trump, his daughter-in-law, who's now kind of the chairwoman of the RNC. It was also Nikki Haley in her endorsement of Trump. And I think most effectively, it was Sarah Huckabee Sanders in her speech, who talked about how Trump was always there for her when she was under a lot great vehement attacks from the unhinged left. So that was a success. And then the other reason that last night was a success was Jim Justice's bulldog, baby dog, who had her own seat next to him in the rostrum. And I don't see how you can lose with baby dog on your side.
Okay, so you're talking about the women, talk about the speeches highlighting Trump's personal qualities. And of course, all of these sorts of efforts are ways to counteract or negate or reassure people on the fence. Aren't going to change people's opinion. But if you're sort of like starting to think, well, maybe I could vote for Trump, and then you hear 3 or 4 people say, you know, he was actually really nice to me when I had a lot of trouble, just a little bit of reassurance. That's all you're really going to get from people whose minds, aren't entirely made up who are watching this. And of course, a very small audience was watching last night. Apparently Monday night, 18 million people watched the convention across all networks everywhere. That's a very, very small crowd. And I assume tonight, because of J.D. Vance, and tomorrow because of Trump, those audiences will grow. But if you have politically interested people who just need to be pushed over a little bit just to say, okay, I'm gonna either I'm coming home to the Republicans and voting for Trump, even though I really didn't want to vote for him in 2020, or genuine undecideds or something like that. That's the best you can hope for from a political convention, except again for the vibe thing, which is, do you want to be with a bunch of people who look kind of cheerful and happy and confident and like they're on the way to success? Or do you want to be with Biden? And more stories overnight, yesterday, Biden at a private meeting with House Democrats screaming at sort of war hero Jason Crow, who said, your message is not getting through about how good you are in foreign policy. And Biden said to him, you go out and tell them I'm the best foreign policy president ever. What are you doing with your Bronze Star? Meaning, are you a coward? Like you're not out there defending me with your Bronze Star? That is a man who is perilously close to saying things not in public, not in private, but in public, that aside from the overall feeling of the debate, Biden is inches away from saying something that is going to basically end his political career before the convention or something. He is under deep pressure. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's like the mood of the Republican convention, split screen that with what Biden's been up to, and it sort of gives the lie to the long-standing Republicans pounce narrative, right? Who's doing the pouncing now? It's Biden. Biden's going around pouncing on Lester Holt.
He's pouncing himself.
Pouncing himself.
That's what's so weird about it. He doesn't need to do any of this. It's the Republican convention. He could just stay at the White House.
Right. But
Joe Biden has never had a filter. He was born without a filter, as we say, right? And that's what you get all these crazy comments he's made over the years and sort of laugh them off as, goofy Uncle Joe. But he's lost now his defenders in the party and people who think it's cute. It's kind of like there was a moment where Ron Paul, who really was an extremely toxic character and personality in the Republican Party and in the libertarian world for a long time, Well, he would, but he was in the final four, I think, for those. What was it, 2008 or 2012? One of those two elections. He was still hanging around late, and he would show up to the debates wearing a oversized jacket, and it looked like he still had the hanger on his suit jacket. And people loved that. They were like, "Look at this grumpy old Broigus man," blah blah blah. And it sort of papered over the fact that he was actually, kind of a crank. Biden is starting to lose the goofy sheen that he's had for a very long time. And the people watching these antics are saying, this is not cute. It's not funny. And it is evidence of psychological and mental decline. Like, in other words, people watching this saying, I'm really worried about this guy. It's not funny anymore because laughing about it feels like elder abuse. This is how Democrats are talking about, especially center left people online. So I think that's the risk to him, is that he sort of loses the goofiness and he really comes out strong. The other thing I would say about the RNC last night is that the main theme seemed to be Trump as father and parenthood. And that was a really interesting contrast, because the convention schedule with Amber Rose and others is not actually designed to be Rick Santorum's social conservative convention, right? But the parenthood was present in every primetime speaker, really, including the regular everyday citizens, people who lost a woman who lost a youngish son, the woman from New York who mentioned before, who lost her war veteran son to fentanyl overdose. There was a lot of that, but there was also explicit. There was, Lara Trump saying, it's all fun and games until it's your father-in-law. And what it's like, what people should know, what it's like to see your father-in-law shot at, and you don't know if he's okay, and this sort of thing in the kids. And then Sarah Huckabee Sanders talked about how her young son, who was 4 years old, and she was working at the White House as a press secretary, he was running to see her, and he saw her and he ran toward her, but Trump was actually in between the two of them, and she realized her 4-year-old was running full speed at the president of the United States, and she didn't know what he was going to do. And Trump sort of put his arms out like to greet him. And instead, the 4-year-old ran right past the leader of the free world, the president of the United States, and into the arms of his mother. And Sarah Huckabee Sanders then said, Trump loved that. Rather than feeling like he was slighted, Trump actually, he loves the father.
But the very fact you have to make the point that Trump loved it, when you could just as easily imagine that he did feel slighted.
Yes,
and
no,
fired her 5 minutes later. Is an interesting. It's an interesting fact that you're still having to humanize Trump in the most basic of ways. Like, yes, he recognizes that a child loves his mother more than he loves Trump.
We'll see if that 4-year-old gets a position in the administration.
There was, we can go in a lot of directions here with Biden or with the convention, but just on the convention for a moment, there was one moment where Trump's face, his expression changed from that kind of serene smile that he's had the first two nights. And that was when Ron DeSantis was on stage and talked about how he's made Florida red. The camera cut to Trump, and Trump had the skeptical expression that you often see him do. So the rivalries are not entirely salved here. But the overall impression that this is a party coming together, that the two chief rivals, Haley and DeSantis, came out to endorse Donald Trump. Earlier in the night, you had Ramaswamy do his shtick. The crowd loved it, by the way. You had the box. It's interesting, the presidential box, the characters there are changing from night to night, depending on who's speaking. And you also had Ben Carson's speech, which I thought was going to go, it seemed like it was going for too long, but then he kind of brought it home and the crowd really loved it. I think on Seth's point too, it wasn't just family. It's also, last night was very religious. It was very spiritual. There were a lot of specific references to Jesus. And so you kind of had this kind of basic conservatism, small c conservatism at work here, where it's about family, it's about religion, and Trump is the defender of those things in this very hostile world, both external and internal.
I just want to draw one more contrast here, which is Matt was talking about the success of the ordinary Americans speaking here. Look at that against what Biden has been up to with these celebrity fundraisers, Hollywood late night hosts. I think it's a really effective contrast for Trump to be drawing at this moment, because particularly what everyone is seeing in Biden's campaign is a facade, and so to contrast that with the realness of what's going on with the RNC.
To follow up on that, Abe, as I was watching last night, I was of course struck by the diversity of the speakers, and yet it seemed to hit me differently than previous Republican conventions. The Republican convention of 2000, for example, the Bush campaign went out of its way to showcase Black men and women, to showcase Hispanic men and women. I think they did the Macarena on the stage in 2000. That was at its height, or actually a little bit after its height, maybe. Last night, though, felt more real than that. A quarter century. There was kind of a phoniness to past Republican attempts to kind of, fill the stadium with the diverse crowd. But last night, there was an authenticity to it that I thought has been missing. And on one level, that was because the stories were so genuine of the people. On a different level, it's because the Republican Party has changed, and this new Trump Party is much more diverse. And then there's the third level. It's just America has changed, and so the rap video that they showed of Trump Baby, it was like it was extremely kitschy, but then there was also something kind of real about it that I couldn't just escape.
I wanted to talk about that. So at I don't know around 10 or something like that, at a transitional moment, there was this 3-minute video with Amber Rose, the person who spoke on Monday night with the face tattoo, and a rapper to the tune of Ice Ice Baby. And my daughter, who was watching with me, sort of said, "What is this?" As it was going on, it's sort of like, "What is this?" And about a minute into it, she said, "This is really well done," and it was. It was funny, and the rap was funny. It was also dirty, by the way, though it was a little hard to make out, but there was a lot of FJB. There was stuff like that. And that was not the only moment like that. Then there was this moment where they did a minute of Trump dancing. They did a super cut of Trump dancing. And of course, Trump looks really funny when he dances. He looks like Elaine on Seinfeld when he dances. And the point about this is that, again, in contrast terms, Joe Biden is a prickly, angry, pissed off, unpleasant old man. And part of the image of Trump smiling beatifically, allowing the convention that he's had to make fun of him, or gentle teasing fun of him, dancing at his rallies, and to have this rap video play. This is all very, again, the contrast between, do you want to vote for these guys who are like, they like violence in the streets, they have this 81-year-old, like sour, at best, sourpuss, and at worst, senile guy, and they're all fighting with each other, and they're all yelling at each other, and they're all trying to get him off stage, and all of this, or look, these guys are they're like having a good time. Trump is having a good time as the nominee, and he just nearly got killed 3 days ago. There's something surreal about it. I don't know what the spirit would have been without the assassination attempt, but the having been shot at, having been injured, though slightly, coming out with the bandage, and having the liberal commentariat, primarily first in the person of Ari Melber of MSNBC, saying that the bandage is a stunt. The bandage is a stunt. It's a badge, using it as a prop. Guy had his ear nearly shot off 96 hours ago. What's he supposed to do? Take the bandage off so that everybody can see the 17 stitches? People on Twitter I'm looking at who are saying, how come we never heard from the hospital where he was treated? That never happens. What's the story there? Why didn't we hear from the hospital? Hospitals can't give briefings on the conditions of patients if the patients don't say go out and give a briefing. Trump was treated and then released. There's something called HIPAA. They're not legally allowed to talk about the health condition of anybody under their care without the permission of the person, or the person actually. And this is where the liberal mind is going to. Michael Steele, former head of the RNC, still questioning whether or not Trump was shot or whether it was a piece of glass. Biden himself said in the primetime address that Trump had been shot. This is the counter voice this week. He wasn't shot. His bandage is fake.
Yeah.
Just
on the fake bandage.
Yeah.
These are the same figures who 20 years ago were overjoyed when John Kerry got to the lectern and told America, I'm John Kerry and I'm reporting for duty. Referencing the war he had fought in a generation prior, and that he then opposed and threw his medals into the Capitol fountain to protest. They love that. Oh, that's not a stunt. Right. That's real. Right. Whereas Trump, as you say, 48 hours after being shot, still has a bandage on his ear. That's fake. I think the extent of psychological breakdown we're experiencing among the resistance is incredible to behold. I mean, think of Joe Scarborough's threat to the Comcast Corporation after coming back on the air yesterday. Morning Joe had been suspended, of course, on Monday because the corporate overlords were worried about what someone might say in the aftermath of the Trump shooting. And Joe Scarborough got back on the air yesterday and said, if it ever happens again, he's walking and he knows things,
He knows where the bodies are buried.
This type of civil war that's happening in the media, it's happening within the Democratic Party, John, as you say, over Biden, the Democrats still holding on in some cases to the idea that they can move Biden off the ticket, even as the three former chairs of the DNC, Brazil, McAuliffe, and Dean, are moving to basically lock the nomination in place within weeks. The Republicans have not been in this type of situation, as I've been saying, in a generation where they see their enemies just kind of
in 1999 and early 2000. George W. Bush was leading in the polls by 10 points. That was the last time. That's 25 years ago. And it turned out, by the way, that it wasn't illusory, but obviously that lead didn't hold. That was the last time that Republicans thought, we have America, we understand America, we have America in the palm of our hand, and the Democrats are clueless. Now, as I say, that was not entirely correct, right? Because the race closed to be the single closest presidential race in history and was won by one electoral vote and by, and the other guy won 500,000 more votes than the guy who won the electoral contest. Republicans haven't felt this way. Like every Republican success has been a counterweight, right? Like to 2010 was a counterweight to the Obama triumph. 2014 was a counterweight to not the Obama triumph, but the continuation of Obama. And they haven't had, and Trump drew to an inside straight, and they hadn't won stuff since. So just the relief of not feeling like you don't really know what's going on, but you kind of know that you're not really the party that people like that much, or that is, understands the root cause. And part of your message is, this isn't the America that we thought it was, and America's going in a different direction, and we're here to stop it and try to reverse it. But that message implicitly says, we're not at the center. We're off on the side, and we're going to drag ourselves back into the center with your help.
But also key to that is the regular citizens thing.
Right.
It's very different when a politician who, let's say the governor of a big state or something, or a senator gets up there and says, we're going to take our country back. What they did that was smart was that you can't much complain about the regular citizens coming in and saying that sort of thing. It doesn't sound as partisan. It doesn't sound as
don't worry.
Sound
People are going to dig
low-road.
into those. Don't worry.
I'm sure they will.
The plumber.
I'm sure they will. But
there are
like
going to be hit stories about those two women. There were
right? About the man
days.
who was killed at the rally.
Right.
The man who was shot at the rally they dug into his Twitter and
by the way,
look, he drinks whole milk or something.
I think this is actually an important point relating to the regular people and what Matt said about the feeling of this convention, which is that it was weirdly previewed, sadly, horribly previewed by the fact that the only people who could be interviewed about what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, were the attendees at the rally, who were all, of course, Trump supporters, because it was a Trump rally. And they seemed really nice, kind of eccentric. There was that guy who's also wandering around the convention floor in the suit that looks like a wall of bricks with the tie. That's also the wall of bricks.
He's a regular. Yeah.
Right. But I mean, the ER doctor, who tried to save the victim's life, a whole bunch
videos
of
people saying there's a man on the roof.
Right.
Like in other words, we've seen not freak out, but hey, there's a man on the roof. We saw him. And then the other side of that is, as people have mentioned, there were no riots or angry protests or anything after that. There was no fallout. Yeah. There was no release.
No, there was an effort to create
from Trump's world.
But
there was an effort to create a narrative that was really repulsive, that, they turned on the media. 3 people in the crowd turned and said, you did this, or something like that. And then it was like, I'm so terrified. Jen Psaki saying, I'm terrified for the media now because they're going to turn on the media. These were lovely Pennsylvania and Ohio people. They were there at this rally because they liked Trump. Something horrible happened right in front of them. They were interviewed for hours by every network and every broadcast, every cable network, and they were like, I like them.
It's an excellent point, and I think this also gets to Matt's point about the diversity that you see at the convention. Just in the cutaway shots, just when you see the crowd, we're actually seeing all these really interesting but clearly organic sort of cultural blends of people out there, like sort of black cowboys and white rappers and sort of like these mixes that of cultures that I don't think the left has understood at all exist. And it reminds me of sort of when Biden started to go to historic black colleges to speak, and sort of spoke with this really dated understanding of white-black relations and Democrats' responsibility toward black people. I think something much more interesting and vibrant is happening in terms of culture and ethnicity in the Trump crowd.
Yeah,
Listen-
the refrain of the Democrats has always been, "Isn't it nice to belong to a party that looks like America?" And it's harder to draw that distinction between the
Right.
two parties in 2024 when you look out the crowd, when you look at the crowds in Trump rallies.
Okay, so let's talk also one other interesting aspect that is not being commented on will be tonight and tomorrow by America as J.D. Vance introduces himself to the American people is that J.D. Vance is married to an Indian woman, raised Hindu, religious household, um, and so he is the avatar of the white working class, left behind, immigrant-hating monsters, married to this extraordinarily accomplished woman who clerked for Kavanaugh and then for John Roberts, was editor of the Yale Law Journal, like a kind of superstar, grew up in Milwaukee. Trump, of course, married to an immigrant. I do not like the way Trump talks about immigrants. I do not like the spirit and the tone of the Republican Party when it talks about immigrants. But there's talking and there's walking and there's all this kind of thing. And this notion, that this is, it's not a lily white party. I don't know what it is exactly. And it certainly isn't as diverse in that skin tone way as the Democratic Party, which I think 70% of Indian Americans vote for the Democrats. And so it's not like Usha Vance is going to pull, Indians to the, there was this one idea once that Bobby Jindal, who was the governor of Louisiana, could maybe pull, he was part of this, dynamic young, and then it turned out, of course, the Indians were very, very Democratic and not
Nikki Haley was second place in the
Nikki
Republican.
Haley. I didn't even mention Nikki Haley. So Nikki Haley, Nimrata Haley, second runner. So these are weird counterfactuals, and they're visual. They're not, this is not a narrative. Like, people can draw their own conclusions, just like you are, Abe, from looking at what they're being shown on television. And I don't know if they care. But Democrats claim that the kinds of people who vote for Republicans care about this, and that they're basically implicitly racist, and they think that everything the country is, they're clinging to their guns and their religion and their outmoded and outdated racialist ideas. And that's not the feeling to me. And I'm, again, I find it necessary at this moment to say I am not a supporter of Donald Trump's, in that sense. Like, I don't think that he has been a net positive for our American conversation or even for the Republican Party. But, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And number one, he is a more appropriately presidential figure right now than Joe Biden is, who is sitting in the White House. Ordinarily, incumbent presidents win the presidency because they're the president. And Biden is probably going to lose the presidency because he's the president and is sitting in the office looking unequal to the office, which is exactly the Jimmy Carter story. Well, Jimmy Carter, of course, was like young. He was, in his early 50s, as the fact that he's still alive attests, when he lost office in 1980. So these are all ancillary matters. But can we talk a little bit about the politicians? Because I thought Haley did something very interesting in her speech, and she came out and there were boos and stuff like that. And Haley came out in her speech and needed to address the elephant in the room, which is foreign policy in Ukraine, because that was one of the things that she was aggressive against and that she represented. Her entire federal service was as the UN ambassador. And she said on Ukraine, the important thing to know is that presidents don't start wars. A good president doesn't start a war. A good president prevents a war. Putin went into Ukraine in 2014 under Obama, and then he tried to seize all of Ukraine under Biden, and he didn't move on Ukraine under Trump. So she's not making an argument about where the party should go on Ukraine in 2023, to 2025, which would possibly be a mistake, because then she would be planting a flag and, there would be a fight over it or something like that. She said, we need to reestablish deterrence in the world. Joe Biden has been an anti-deterrent president, and Donald Trump's foreign policy is a foreign policy of deterrence. That's a kind of unified, that is, it's not much, but it is a kind of unifying message. I think we agree with
it was peace
this.
through strength, right? That was
Peace through strength. That was Reagan,
entire
exactly.
theme of her thing
Yeah.
was peace through strength, and she basically got Trump and Vance's RNC to, stand up and cheer the concept, at least.
Right. Now, it's funny because then, we read in an interview that Trump did yesterday that he's now demanding that Taiwan pay us to defend Taiwan. So Trump has not changed his colors in any way. This is the same kind of thing that he was saying about NATO while he was president, so he'll still, this notion that he's, I don't know, whatever. But it's sort of interesting that she and her people found some form of common ground. And by the way, the right form of common ground, like it's a message that we promulgated during the course of the Trump administration, largely in Noah Rothman's words on the commentary blog, that while everybody in liberal media was saying that Trump was an agent of Putin, American policy toward Russia was very tough. And so there was the rhetoric and there was the reality, and the rhetoric is bad. The Putin praising rhetoric is bad. And I am not saying any, but the policy was not bad. And that's,
by the way,
go ahead.
For what it's worth, I just got back from Ukraine not long ago. There's a much larger number of Ukrainians, including parliamentary members, who feel that way too. That though Biden and Obama say the right things, they do not necessarily trust a Biden-led U.S. to be any stronger on Ukraine support than Trump. They don't know necessarily, but they look at things like Nord Stream 2, giving Iran money, which then allows Iran to supply the Shahed drones to Russia and so on. And they are much more, let's wait and see, who knows what Trump will do about this.
I mean, I think that's the key line, Abe, which is we really just don't know what Trump is going to do about Ukraine. And, Vance's elevation certainly would, I think, make supporters of continued aid to Ukraine justifiably nervous. There's one country, however, where there is no debate in the Republican Party, and that is Israel. And you saw that again on the stage last night. Matt Brooks, the RJC, talked to the RNC.
The Republican Jewish Coalition.
Correct. He spoke to the Republican National Convention last night. He got a great response. There was a prayer for Israel. There were references to the anti-Semitism on our college campuses. Elise Stefanik talked. She got a great response.
Nikki
prayer
Haley
for the
also,
hostages.
Yeah,
Right?
prayer for the hostages at the very beginning.
Nikki Haley talked about anti-Semitism.
I mean, for supporters of Israel, last night was, I think, very reassuring about where the Republican Party is and remains. And it was funny. I was watching the live stream on my phone while watching the MLB All-Star game on my television with my son. And so my son, who's my, political expert and advisor, he's 10 years old, was watching some of the convention with me. And he after, dipping into it for an hour and a half or so, he looked at me and he said, "What are the Democrats going to say?" And I actually think that was a pretty good question, because they've now boxed themselves into this place where Trump is a threat to democracy, but we have to lower down the temperature. And Trump is going to become a dictator, but we have to all watch our rhetoric. And Trump is going to institute the Handmaid's Tale, but let's lower the temperature and the climate in our politics. We have the sense, or I have the sense, that the Democratic convention will be much less polished, much less defined, and much more schizophrenic than the Republican convention that's now halfway through.
Well, I mean, how can it be polished? I mean, I got to read some ads, and then we got to talk about one of the reasons it can't be polished, because what Biden is doing today and has been doing this week in policy terms. Before I do that, let me just talk to you about our friends at Shopify, who are trying to help you create a really great retail experience, but it's hard to do that with multiple stores, teams of staff, fulfillment centers, separate workflows. But with Shopify Point of Sale, you can do it all without complexity. Shopify's point of sale system is a unified command center for your retail business. It brings together in-store and online operations, even across 1,000 locations. Imagine being able to guarantee that shopping is just always convenient. No matter if you're down the aisle, ship to customer, buy online, pick up in store, all are made simpler so customers can shop how and where they want. And staff have the tools they need to close the sale every time. And let's face it, acquiring new customers is expensive. With Shopify Point of Sale, you can keep existing customers coming back to your stores with consistent, tailored experiences and first-party data that give marketing teams a competitive edge. Want more? Check it out at shopify.com/commentary. Commentary has to be all lowercase for you to get the particular benefits here. Learn how to create the best retail experiences without complexity. Shopify.com/commentary. And I think I told you on Monday, Quince, our other new advertiser this week, sent me both a shirt, a linen shirt, and a linen jacket before we were going to read it so that I could experience it. And I love them both. I love this shirt. I love this kind of funny, interesting Nehru-like jacket that they sent. And Quince has all the seasonal must-haves, like 100% European linen shirts from $30, performance polos, versatile activewear. The best part, at Quince, items are priced 50 to 80% less than smaller brands. And by partnering directly with top factories, Quince cuts out the cost of the middleman and passes the savings on to us. And it only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices, along with premium fabrics and finishes. Fill your closet with timeless pieces you'll be wearing for summers to come with Quince. Go to quince.com/commentary for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/commentary to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/commentary. So, Joe Biden.
Can I just interrupt and just to ask a little bit more about the quote Nehru-like jacket?
Yes.
That you now have in your ensemble? Is there a chance that I'll be able to see that sometime in the near future?
Yes, you will. Anyway, okay. It's 3/4 of an Nehru jacket because it buttons straight up, but then it doesn't button all the way up to the to the neck. So, but it buttons most of the way up. Anyway,
well, your next visit at the UN, I think that would be a great piece to debut.
Okay, so there you go. So let's talk about Joe Biden and what he's doing this week, because he's doing stuff this week, and it's really kind of interesting and weird, right? Announces a 5% policy that he wishes to institute a 5% rent control cap, 5% cap on rent increases nationwide from Washington, using, as I now understand it, a change in depreciation schedules on the ownership of rental property by large-scale landlords. That's policy number one that he is announcing. National rent controls. Rent control, I believe, being a policy that, as you know how people say 51 economists say that Biden, like it helped the economy or something like that. I think 561 million economists believe that rent control is a disastrous and disastrous policy that destroys rather than saves housing stock, and raises rather than lowers the cost of housing and all of that. So that's an interesting a gambit for something that will never actually be made into law. But so he has announced that, and now of course we're getting the Supreme Court package is going to be announced today, I believe. Reforms to the Supreme Court, including term limits and beatings and the right to the right not to. I don't even know what, again, things that are either A, wildly unconstitutional and never thought of before, or B, who's going to pass them. So these are interesting because he is like throwing goodies at either constituents or the intellectual constituents. And it all seems it's not about November. I don't think it's about November. It's about late August, right? This is all about he's doing things to make it clear to Democrats that they shouldn't go into open revolt against him.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. The first is there's a difference between the far left policies that the White House telegraphs to the press and that the White House describes in its press releases, and the far left policies that come out of Joe Biden's mouth. And so, for example, the rent control, which has this 5% cap nationwide, it's a terrible policy for all the reasons you lay out. When Joe Biden unveiled it yesterday, talking to the NAACP, struggling to read the teleprompter, he said he was going to cap rents at $55, which, I mean, maybe I've been wrong about the guy. I mean, that sounds pretty good. So who knows how the Supreme Court reforms will come out when he actually has to come in front of an audience and describe them. The second thing is, as you say, John, this is chum for the far left and the Progressive Caucus. People were wondering, well, why is Bernie Sanders so adamant in his support that for Joe Biden as the 2024 nominee? Why did AOC say a couple weeks ago, the matter is closed? She's decided. She's the AOC is the decider, and the matter of Joe Biden's nomination is closed. Well, we know why, and that's because he's promising them a huge role in a second Biden administration, not unlike, incidentally, the role he promised them in the first Biden administration. You go back, you wonder what if Biden loses in November, what was his really big mistake? I think the big mistake was after winning the nomination in 2020, on the basis that he was the only electable Democrat, he then moved to make an alliance with the left. And he had these unity platform documents with Bernie Sanders and AOC. He adopted a lot of their agenda, not all of it, not the most radical parts, but a lot of it. And since in office, he has governed not as the moderate that he has pretended to be, but as a progressive Democrat. And, he wants to be the next great iteration of American liberalism, from FDR to LBJ to Joe Biden. But that has, I think, ruined his political standing, and it's made the country a lot worse, too.
It was that.
I just say a very minor point. I just want to make what sounds like a minor point, but because Matt mentioned it, the $55 flub, I just want to say that the consensus is that he was misreading the teleprompter, and I just want to say that if he's going to have trouble reading the teleprompter, and I'm not saying this to make fun of him, I'm saying that his lifeline has been to at least be able to read the words in front of him. He's really out to sea if the teleprompter is not going to save him from these flubs either, if he's just going to go out there and say whatever comes to his brain. That's a crutch that he desperately needs.
He said something else yesterday in an effort to do a slap at, a slap back at Trump that was really deeply cringe-inducing, and I think in a way that is not helpful to him. Speaking in Las Vegas at the NAACP convention, because Trump had mentioned during the debate, how what a great job Trump had done for black jobs. Remember? And so Biden says, I know what a black job is. It's vice president.
Did he really say that?
Yeah. Yeah. Folks, I know what the hell a black job is. It's the vice president of the United States. I know what a black job is. The first black president in American history, Barack Obama. Okay, so maybe I'm wrong, and maybe it's fine because, he's going before a black audience, being, sort of like just, throwing them chum. I mean, that's cringy. I'm sorry. That's just like, it's when also, Trump says stuff like any Jew who doesn't vote for me is crazy or something like that. I mean, it's like where, don't talk about other people who are not you like that. It's, weird. And now the
There's
story,
always been a question just on that, can you speak Trump? Right.
yeah.
I mean, he's been in the spotlight now for almost a decade. Can you speak Trump? Do you understand what he means when he has these odd formulations or these weird jokes or kind of trolls the left? And I think more Americans over the course of the past decade have learned to speak Trump. And so even the black jobs line, that was in reference to illegal immigration. And in his argument, it's not saying it's the right argument, but Trump is saying that illegal immigrants are taking jobs from American-born citizens, including African Americans. That's what he means. If you speak Trump, you know that. It's the same as dictator for a day, right? It's a joke. Trump was making a joke. But Biden used the line against him in the interview just this week, saying that Trump says he's going to be a dictator. The inability to speak Trump is now, I think, limited to a very cocooned group that resides in the precincts in the media and in the Democratic Party and in the broader left. But more Americans, it seems, are just beginning to pick up what Trump means when he says locutions such as this.
Okay.
And I think also that it's a great point, but I also think that the inability is mostly faked. I think they know that he's joking when he says, "I'm going to be dictator for a day." They pretend not to speak Trump because they think this is still 4 years ago or something.
I don't know. I think a lot of people don't know it's a joke. I mean, I genuinely believe that any word that comes out of Trump's mouth is evaluated in the flattest possible way for the worst possible result. And I think that's heartfelt. I mean, I don't think, like my friend Jonathan Last doesn't mean it when he says Trump wants to be a dictator. I think he means it. And David Frum means it. And Bob Kagan means it. They mean it. And they think that he's revealing something there when he says it. And then they telegraph that message, and then other people buy it. And then you have this vast number of people who are not, again, in this, focused, fixed view of politics on a moment-to-moment basis, who go, nah, I don't know, you're sounding a little hysterical. And a lot of what happened over the last year is, I think Americans, we thought Trump would be really damaged by the legal cases. And I think a lot of America, he wasn't damaged by the legal cases. So why not? Well, because they're like, it's all part of this. They're also hysterical about Trump. I don't, or the people who hate him, so it's fine. And then they're like, just like, settle down already. Like, he's part of our national furniture. I want to quickly, before we close, talk about the Secret Service and this genuinely staggering thing that the head of the Secret Service, Ms. Cheadle, said about the roof and why they didn't have somebody on the roof where Crooks, the shooter, shot at Trump from, because it was too steep. That the roof was too steep. And the gigantic political mistake, I think, that I do not understand Biden is making here, which is why he didn't fire her 5 minutes after the shooting and say, we're going to have a full, and we're going to do this. This is unacceptable. No American politician under Secret Service protection should be at risk in any way, shape, or form from a bullet whizzing by their head. I've asked for the resignation of I have dismissed the head of the Secret Service. And we will make sure this never happens again. It was a gimme. I don't know why he didn't do it. I don't understand why he's letting this story fester, why we're hearing about these fights between the different agencies, where this squad was. Was there a squad under the shooter in the building, or was it in the secondary building, an adjacent building? Therefore, they didn't know. All we know is that the head of the Secret Service said that it was not safe to have a Secret Service agent on a roof with a clear line of sight to the podium. How is it possible that she still has a job? I mean, that's actually not a rhetorical question. Am I
Well, no one's telling her to leave. That matters.
right? Why?
The Secretary of Defense disappeared for
Right.
a week and a half.
Yeah, longer.
And before we knew what the problem was. I mean, we know there was a real problem. We're not putting down that, but we didn't know. And Joe Biden didn't know where his defense secretary was, and nobody had spoken. There's just this kind of looseness with protocol. Just people not having to be professional is like a really big problem.
I don't even know how to evaluate the meta meaning of what she was saying. There's the Secret Service. Its literal mission is to protect individuals under their protection from being killed. That's what the Secret Service is for. It has a couple of other missions, but that is what it is for. So there's a podium and there are buildings nearby the podium, and they have some snipers on other buildings, and they didn't have one on this building because it wouldn't have been safe for the sniper, but it was safe for a 20-year-old kid who was able to climb down, place his rifle in the right place, and come within a millimeter of killing the former president and possibly future president of the United States. And her thing is like, we were just trying to make sure that no Secret Service agents slid and hurt themselves on the roof. When Secret Service agents it is presumed, will throw themselves in front of a bullet and die rather than allow the person in their charge to be killed.
Yeah, people were putting out pictures of Secret Service members standing on the roof of the White House. There are sloped roofs on the White House that they're standing on. They're like, you see a picture
Americans
of a
go on their sloped roofs.
45 degree angle. So it's like, no, we know that you send them up to. But the other thing about that is that even if you want to make a case about the roof and the slope, the guy had to get up onto the roof. The problem here is more than just, should we have put somebody on a dangerous roof, or would it have been like in, the Home Improvement, the old Tim Allen show, where somebody, the goofy dad falls off the roof or something like that. It's not, it's this place and this building were unsecured. People were saying there's a guy with a gun. Like, it's a whole blind spot of the secure area. How did the guy get on the roof? Presumably, there are unsloped places you could have stationed a cop or somebody by a door to the staircase outside the building. Like this, it's so much bigger than what she's trying to wiggle out of with an absolutely ridiculous excuse.
It's very big. It's very big, but it's also, this is where, like, we started talking about ordinary people, right? And the Republican convention speaking to ordinary people. 10 million Americans go up on their roof, which is sloped, to get leaves out of the gutters, or to do a roofing job, to patch tiles, and those roofs are sloped, and it's not that safe, and they do it anyway, so they don't have to hire somebody and pay $600. They could go to Home Depot, buy the tiles, and do it themselves. And the head of the Secret Service is saying it's too dangerous for a Secret Service agent to be on a sloped roof. That is not good for Joe Biden. In other words, like, if you're thinking about what people are thinking about incidents like this, and the person who represents the administrator, who is the political official who is in charge of this agency, says, it's like the guy in Uvalde. It's like the police chief in Uvalde saying, we weren't going to send the cops in to save those kids. It was too dangerous for them. And that guy is now in jail. That police chief has been arrested and charged with negligence in the commission of manslaughter. And, like, I'm not saying that's her case, but we just had an example of a law enforcement official saying, I needed to protect my guy so he didn't have to be on the roof.
He hasn't fired anyone, John. They had the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. It's the same national security team.
Yeah.
We have millions of people across the southern border. Mayorkas is still in office. We have Cheadle here overseeing the worst incident in the Secret Service in decades. She's still there. Biden's not going to do anything. Maybe the way to do it is to convince Hunter that she needs to go, and then they can fire her that way. But you have a serious breakdown. That's what the problem is. I mean, the problem is not just Biden's age. The problem is his entire approach to the job, setting the conditions for a Trump restoration.
Okay, well, not much more to be said than that, and we did not actually discuss who was going to do a recommendation today. So
we can do. I think that we I think it would be a good day to recommend. Because we've been talking about the conventions, and we were talking a couple times about John Kerry's convention and John Kerry reporting for duty. Is that Andrew Ferguson wrote in the September 2010 edition of Commentary the greatest observational column about that period of the Democrats and that convention itself. And it was the piece is about Peter Beinart, really, and the sort of conversion from, tough guy liberalism. But actually, you would understand a lot about the way that Democrats overreact and overact to the need to do these sorts of things. And the great line, of course, is there were also a telltale neoliberal excess to the convention that nominated him, talking about Kerry, in a hall festooned with so much military paraphernalia and overrun by so many saluting veterans that you might have thought you were watching a Latin American coup. As only Andy Ferguson can do.
So that's Andy Ferguson's September 2010 piece. We will try to link to it in. Make it easy for people to get. But you do remind me of one thing. Andy Ferguson has a review in the current issue of Commentary of Glenn Loury's book, Late Admissions. And I am now 3/4 of the way through Glenn Loury's book, Late Admissions, and Andy compares. It's a very, 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 very favorable review. And deservedly so, because what Loury pulls off here in this memoir of his extraordinarily complicated and fascinating life is a pretty remarkable piece of literary execution. It is a beautifully, spectacularly well-written book about a person coping throughout his life with bad impulses and a remarkable brain at war with each other. And Andy's review makes it possible. I think we should recommend a piece by Andy every day, as the Commentary recommends. But that piece about Peter Beinart was extraordinary.
And Late Admissions has been a Commentary recommends.
It has. That's right.
From me.
From you. Yeah. That's right. Well, I just so happens that
I'm glad that you're following my recommendation.
It's really a stunning piece of writing. I'm not even now talking about the content. I mean, just as a piece of writing, it's one of the more I don't even know, beautiful in some ways evocations of a life in its all of its darkness and complexity. Anyway, so yes, we have done it again. We've come to the end here, and we will be back tomorrow to talk about J.D. Vance. So for Abe, we didn't even talk about Robert Menendez. A sitting senator gets convicted of being bribed.
He's not going anywhere either.
Story. It's like the 17th story.
I'm from New Jersey. That's like a page 13B story.
Fair enough. Jersey, okay, so. Fair enough. Anyway, for Seth, Matt, and Abe, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.